question we've had this week, and I must say we've had it a couple of times now. So it's obviously something that's of causing great interest. Now, the scenario was that the tenant in a property, the tenant has been given notice and is moving out, and there was no issues about any of that. It wasn't an eviction; it was just a normal move on of a tenancy. But before they've moved out, they have contracted COVID, so they're now COVID positive. They're and they're due to move out in the next week to 10 days. Now, obviously, the question is, what do we do now? Well, clearly there's not a lot you do now because there's no real, this isn't legislated, there's no guidelines for this, but we need to consider what is reasonable action. And, at the end of the day, the property needs to be handed back in a condition where the property is ready to be released. So it needs to be, relettable, if that were ever such a word. So when you're considering what is reasonable in terms of dealing with this situation, and remember when we use that word reasonable, it's fair and reasonable as NCAT would look at it for us. So the tenant's due to move out, they've contracted COVID-19, the agency is not going to insist that they move out, as it's going to put the community at risk because the virus needs to be contained within that property. Now, the next question is, obviously the property needs to be deep cleaned. So who's going to pay for that? And that's the question that starts coming around. So is the tenant responsible for the cost of the COVID-19 deep clean? Because obviously it's a lot more expensive. The group I was talking to this morning when I was running CPD, they've had deep cleans. One of them was of a commercial premises. One was a childcare centre, and it's ranged from 6,000 down to 500. So there's a huge difference depending on the size of the property and the type of property that you're going in. One was an urgent one because they needed it to be reopened the following day, and others are not so urgent. For a property where someone's left, the urgency may not be there. Of course, there's urgency there for the landlord because they obviously want to get it released. Now, they would need to get from the people doing the COVID deep clean their certificate of completion from that specialist cleaning company, because not every cleaner obviously can conduct a COVID-19 deep clean. So you as an agency would keep that on record and disclose where required, because obviously as an agency you have a duty of care to anyone that you're going to allow onto that premises. So that's agents conducting final inspections, that's prospective tenants inspecting the premises, new tenants moving in. I mean, there's so much research out there and so much information. It's hard to know. You look at things and COVID-19, they say, can stay on different kinds of household services between 24 hours and 10 days. So, we can't be sure on any of this because there's we're hearing different things. So there's a risk if the premises are not professionally cleaned. So, that's kind of the no-brainer there. Yes, it needs to be cleaned. Who's paying for it? The word negotiation comes to mind here because as I said before, this is not legislated. There's no guidelines around this. So it's a point of negotiation. So you would say, well, it's not the landlord's fault that COVID's in the property. Is it the tenant's fault? Well, the tenant was living there. It's not a fault. You can't put blame on this one. So there's a point of negotiation. Obviously, if the tenant refuses to pay for it, it still needs to be done. Does the landlord then, somebody needs to pay for this, then it's the landlord's responsibility to pay for the deep clean. Obviously, they'd talk to if they've got landlord insurance, they'd talk to see if it's covered by that. It may also come down to, well, then there's going to be a claim on the bond. And obviously, if that's going off to NCAT, there's going to be that question of, was it a fair and reasonable cost that you're putting onto the tenant? And I think if you've taken all the right steps through there, that fair and reasonableness is the property needs to be deep cleaned. There really isn't you haven't got a choice on that one. So, there's a couple of options there, but it's about negotiation. And I mean, that's you guys as agents, there's your skill set in a nice little bundle. This is what you guys are really good at. So use all of those negotiation skills that you're good at for when you're being a property manager, when you're being a salesperson, and you bring it back in here and you've got to negotiate between the tenants and the landlords here on this one. So, and whatever that negotiated outcome is, that's, you know, obviously what you document, and then you move on from there and get on with the next tenancy. So not a really clear answer, but in terms of you've got to negotiate it, yes, you've got to do it, yes, it's a point of disclosure, and then moving on to the next point.